Welcome to the Return on Lifestyle podcast with Rey Descalso from Pravada Wealth Management. In this podcast, we help you overcome financial worries and make sense of planning, investing, insurance, and banking. Join us for this journey as Rey draws from his expertise and interviews brilliant minds to help you enjoy life. The best is yet to come.
Hello and welcome to Return on Lifestyle with Rey Descalso from Pravada Wealth Management. Today we're going to be talking about transitions, and specifically, we're going to be talking about women in transition or widows. And Rey has a powerful resource, and that resource is a transition journal that he uses with widows. And I'll tell you what, I have had the pleasure of taking a look at this, and it is robust, and it is amazing, and it is heartfelt. And I can't wait to talk to Rey about it. Rey, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, sir. Thanks for asking, man.
Yeah, like I said just a minute ago, this is one of the best documents I've ever seen in my life. One of the best journals, if you will, or you call it a transition journal. I'd call it a resource or a tool. Wow, this thing is packed with great information. Not to derail things too much, but I had a dear friend who passed from cancer a few years back. He had 3 kids. We were very close with him and his wife and his children, and we saw that was really my first hand seeing young adults that had to go through something like this, and all the work that we had to help her with, just because we didn't want her to have to deal with all the things that were going to be cascading down very quickly on her with 3 kids, household, jobs, everything else. So I read through this, and I'm impressed. I'm very impressed.
Great. Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. I created the Transition Journal for Widows really out of necessity for my own practice because, statistically, you think about it, my father is going to pass away before my mom does. Never mind the fact that my father's about 9 years older than my mom, even if they were the same age. We men don't seem to last very long, And so the statistics are that my mom will be a widow, and that made me think. And then the clients that were coming to me, typically referrals from younger clients where the father passes away, and they say, "Could you talk with my mom?" And I realized over the first 3 or 4 or 5 years of my career, a high percentage of my clients were recent widows. And so I developed this transition journal for them, and quite frankly for myself as well, to help me help them, and to quantify and to codify how we approach really something that's a really big deal. You and I were talking before we press record, and you made a good point. 85% of the financial decisions are made by the wife in a couple. And the way my wife and I work it out is I'm in charge of all the big decisions, very traditional, 1950s Stepford wife, type thing. I'm in charge of all the big decisions. She's in charge of all the little decisions. And in 22 years, we've never had a big decision yet. So
yes, exactly.
Very successful, But in all seriousness, though, also too, going back to that, a lot of folks in a relationship, in a marriage, you're going to have somebody who has strengths and weaknesses, and so you divvy up the labor. Oftentimes, the man says, "Hey, you know what?" The husband says, "I'm going to take care of the finances, the investing, and so forth." And in that case, then there is a lot of catching up to do that a widow has to do, and so I've seen that in my own experience as a financial planner, trying to provide the very best holistic advice, but also to provide the education to catch them up, so to speak, to where they feel confident. And then also finally it's a different time of life and a very unique time of life. And so there's I talk a lot about emotions, and typically I talk about emotions like fear and greed. Fear makes us take too much risk. Greed makes us take too little risk. Well, in a transition from being in a one-woman household, one-person household, where you are now, it's a woman-led household, that's another emotion altogether. The emotions of grief, that whole grief cycle is happening at the same time that important, mathematical and financial decisions have to be made. And so that's why we created the Transition Journal. And I want to say that, you may be like me, a 40-something, guy who I'm never going to be a widow, this is still going to be something that you're going to want to get as a copy to have on hand, even if it's for your own mother or just to understand how the process works for folks that you may know. And of course, too, if you reach out to us at your team, YOURTEAM at privadawealth.com, and just ask for the transition journal, we'd be more than happy to send you that PDF file. And and so I'd like to take the time that we've got together here today and cover the first part of it, at least, on how you can use the transition journal and how we use it in the office with our widow clients who are recently widowed and need that help.
Yeah, I'd love it. And for those listening, this is about 17 pages long, packed with great information, very useful tools and resources within here. So, Ray, I'm going to ask, can we do at least a second podcast, maybe even a third, going through this? Because I think it's that valuable, and I think it's that important to do this at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's plan on that, and so let's begin.
All right,
let's begin and go through it, and we'll begin with the end in mind. I like that. Let's do that.
All right, sounds good. So, where do we start, or where does the journal start? I guess is the real question.
Yeah. So what we did is we took the journal, we put it into 3 different sections. And the reason I say 3 is because you're going to really want to do sections 1, section 2, and section 3 uninterrupted, because distractions can slow you down and you can make errors and break your train of thought. Mm-hmm. And so our first section is going to be talking about your destination. And one of the things that is important is to start with your why. And as a widow, it's time to kind of take stock of your goals, your ideal goals, your acceptable goals, and really get down to where you're at personally in life. Okay, this is not a time, the beginning of this document is to figure out how you want the rest of your life to go, because you're taking agency, you're taking control. Why? Why are we gathering these documents? Why are we dotting our I's and crossing our T's? We're doing it because we want to live our very best life. And all that money is money is simply a tool. It's like electricity. It's not good or bad, but it gives us the power to do certain things. So the question is what do you want to do? We call that your destination. So section number 1 is your destination. Where are you going? Section 2 is, we call it transportation and luggage. So now we go from the big ideas, the why, to the how and the what. This is where we take a financial inventory. We list our stuff. The stuff we own and the stuff we owe. We take a look at some of our good luggage and some of our baggage, so to speak. Yep. And it's important to know what you have, so you know what you want to keep and what you want to discard. Both, by the way, equally important. And then what you'll find a lot of times is folks discover, wow, I have more than I previously thought. And also to remember, my goal is to have the heart of a teacher. So that is not just, okay, I've got this much in CDs and this much in stocks and I've got such and such. It really is to say, do you understand, hey, how does this work? And why did you have it? And why would you keep it? And why would you get rid of it, for that matter? Mm-hmm. And then the final section is we call it the itinerary and travel log. And when you are newly widowed, there is a timeline. There are some things that have to be done quickly, and there are some things that have to be done continually. And so that is a checklist of things that need to be done quickly and things that we can help you with. And there's also some things that need to be done continually, whether that be, RMDs, or whether that be paying your taxes on April 15. It may sound silly, it may sound simple, but having that travel log of things that we're going to do on a weekly, monthly, annual basis, I find is helpful. And so taking these 3 sections, the first one is your destination. And in the your destination part of our journal, we just ask a few questions. And it's a journal, so obviously there's no wrong answers. These are your answers. But, I know that you are a coach for guys like me, a business coach that help us take our practices to the next level. And one of the things that you've shared with me, Eric, is that, when you have that conversation with somebody, and when you take these questions and you write your answer down, it makes it real.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so it makes it real. And remember, we're processing the grief of a spouse who has passed, and there's a disorientation because your daily life, your rituals have all changed. So the first question we ask is, now that your spouse has passed, what are your top lifestyle or financial goals? And the reason we ask that question is because oftentimes we are, and this is true whether you're older or whether you're younger, whether you've been married a little bit or a lot, we are creatures of habit, and we get into this rut, so to speak. And so the reason for that question is I want to know, what are your top lifestyle and financial goals, because it helps them identify the ones that they had when they were, a two-person marriage. And it helps them to figure out, okay, what is it that I really want to do? And there's no wrong answers here, because ultimately things may change and they may stay the same. One of the ways they could possibly change is oftentimes, and this is a strange phenomenon that I've seen, when the other spouse passes away, you feel like, hey, you know what? Now that my spouse is gone, there are some things that I want to do. I actually want to increase my travel with the grandkids. I want to visit more places to see more people. I want to do things that he wasn't that into. And then also, too, conversely, we see it to where, hey, you know what? Now that he's gone, I want to, kind of take my foot off the gas a little bit. And that's something to be concerned about, too, because we want to make sure that the grief doesn't overtake us and we don't, and we kind of have that conversation. And it impacts your finances, it impacts your financial goals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The second question we ask is, take a few moments, and this is something where it can be self-guided. This is not something that you have to be sitting in front of your advisor. In fact, we want you to take a good hour with a cup of coffee and take your time doing this. Question number 2 is section number 2 is take a few moments and describe what your ideal lifestyle would be 12 months from now. Now, that sounds like to me the exact same question of what I just asked. But it's not, because ultimately it's saying, okay, you say these are your goals. Now I want you to fast forward 12 months. Let's get real specific. What will your life be like on a Tuesday in September 12 months from now, next year? And it makes it a little bit more vivid, a little bit more specific. We call this the ladder of abstraction. And so what we want to do is we want people to think really, truly in more vivid detail, because it kind of shakes you by asking you that question a second time. And then we ask, and this is important as well, the next thing we ask you to do is, in your description of your ideal above, what's essential and what's non-negotiable? For instance, are there some things that you can have less of, or are there some conditions that you cannot live without? What I would share is, let me tell you just a quick story of, I always call all of my example clients Joanne. I don't know why. I don't even know a Joanne, but that's probably why.
But that's why.
Joanne, her husband, his health had been failing, over the years, or really the last decade. He had become more and more disabled, and he finally passed away. And as I asked her this question, I said, so, Joanne, I said, what does your life look like 12 months from now? And one of the things that she wanted to do is she wanted to give away her money while she was still alive and able to enjoy it, enjoy giving it, So she wanted to get on a spend down program where she was giving her kids and her grandkids extra money because she thought to herself, hey, time value of money, why would I want to keep this $1,000 instead of giving it to the 529 college plan of a grandchild so it can grow now? For their goals and enjoy it. And so she was having a lot of fun with that. And I asked her, I said, well, what's essential on this list here? What's non-negotiable? And one of the things that she says, you know what, Ray, here's the deal. I have to have enough income coming in that I can have someone clean my house, take care of the yard, and do all of that. I thought, well, that's great. That's great. And out of curiosity, Joanne, I have to remember what name I call her, Joanne, why is that? And she said, well, because to me, what's the most important is that I'm able to spend a lot of time with these kids, with the people in my life. And what's going to keep me, if I'm washing dishes and mowing the yard, and she was real active and, did all that kind of stuff around the house. If I'm the one doing that, it isn't going to be the type of life that I want. So that's an expense that you're going to look at me and say, why are you spending $1,000 on this kind of a luxury, non-negotiable?
Yeah.
I thought, wow, that's really insightful. She gets it. Joanne gets it. And it was powerful as we had that conversation, not just on how much do you need in income, but why. She was more than willing to forego exotic travel. Most of her family lived close by. She was more than happy to not eat out as much or lessen her cable bill. Those things were just easy to get rid of because she knew why she needed the income, and her goals had changed. And so she's an example of why asking these questions is pretty powerful, because life has changed. And when life changes, goals change. When goals change, how you use your money and where you steer your funds makes a big difference. And I've had to go the other way too. I've had folks who they do a lot of travel, and got some clients going over to the Alps in September. And those are fun things, and you need to make the most of your life. So these questions matter. Question number 4 is what roadblocks in your financial life need to be fixed, whether that's income, debt, or clarity. And so the reason I want to stop here is because oftentimes I'll miss, if you will, some of the things that are really bothering a widow. Things that they feel are impossibilities, things that are roadblocks, things that are impediments. It's speed bumps at the very least. And I want to get that out there on the table. And it's important that you say to yourself, okay, where are the weak points of my financial plan? And sometimes that's the income. Sometimes it's the assets. But oftentimes I find it is clarity. It's, do I understand what I own, why I own it, what it does? And the job of a financial planner is to have the heart of a teacher. It's to coach, it's to educate, it's to clarify. And if we're doing that, we're doing our job. And so if there's a weakness there where you feel like I lack clarity, well, that's what the financial planner is there for, to explain it, to teach, and to walk you through that process of getting control and getting a grasp of where you are and where you want to be. And then finally, in the transition journal, we talk about, on this journal aspect of it, what makes you worry and what keeps you up at night. And what you'll notice is I don't talk about money there. I'm not saying, hey, what are your thoughts about,
what are your financial concerns? I mean, there's...
Yeah. What do you think about the Chinese tariffs and so forth? That's not the question. What keeps you up? Because that open-endedness, it could be healthcare. It could be family. It could be, a lot of different things. And just getting that out there, because those things that are bothering you are also what's distracting you from the next couple of sections here as we get granular and as we get practical and we start implementing. And then in the very last section, it's a list of ranking. And I ask the participant here, the widow, to rank the goals and the dreams below in her personal order of importance. And the reason I do it is because what we found is, and it wasn't actually me, it was a study done by some professors, is that if you suggest goals and you suggest dreams, so to speak, people will realize, oh yeah, that is something that's important to me. They don't think about it unless you suggest it to them. Okay, so and especially if you're in a state of shock and the loss.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a normal person. I mean, we don't think about those things, and for somebody who is going through a tragedy, or it could be 6 months ago, it could be a year ago, it's still very fresh, it's still very painful. How much more are they likely to kind of just not think about something that would be very important to them, and they just didn't cross their mind? So being able to suggest those things or have this list, it's beautiful, and I love it. So anybody who is listening to this podcast, I know you can't see it, but you can if you ask Ray for it. And reach out and contact him. We'll give that information at the end of the podcast again. But Ray, so just kind of walk through this, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of giving a couple examples of things that they might just not think about.
Yeah, let me share that with you. One of the dreams and goals that a lot of folks aren't really thinking about is moving. Widows oftentimes aren't thinking about it at the time, that a move may be in order, whether it's downsizing or whether it's looking at possible healthcare issues with special needs or elder care or assisted living.
Yeah.
And so I put moving on that list because if we can start the thought process about moving now, then there's some agency. There's some, hey, I'm not going to let it happen to me. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to talk about it. And one of the other ones that oftentimes my widows don't think about are major purchases. Is there a major purchase that you aren't considering right now? Because, why would you consider it? Why would you think about the car that you have to replace? Why would you think about purchasing something large when you're thinking about something so much more important than just stuff? So these are just to jog the memory, to remind you of maybe what you were thinking about 6 months ago. And so those are some things that I put on this list it's a short list, but it helps the widow to kind of say, yeah, you know what, right, you're right. I always was thinking about giving more to charity. Let me rethink that now. Maybe that's not as big of a goal, or maybe it is.
Yeah.
And then we also go through, and the same thing, we provide a list when it comes to roadblocks. And there's several things here on the list. Roadblocks would be the worries, the things that are an impediment to you having those dreams come true. And one of the ones that folks often, or the widows oftentimes are not really looking at, and that is living too long, outliving your money. We typically have a pessimistic view, especially after we've just lost someone. We have a pessimistic view of our own lifespan. But statistically speaking, that is something that we have to be really concerned about, because living a long time means we need durable income. It means it's the biggest challenge in financial planning is sequence of returns risk. I joke that we always come back to that. And then one of the ones that it's very important, and I think this is the key, I say on the list of things that could be a roadblock or a worry in retirement, are you worried about being bored or unfulfilled? And this is something that I think we got to sit with a little bit, and we got to think about, because if that's something that oftentimes we don't realize that can be becoming disconnected from your people group, from your community, and not having that purpose because a spouse is gone. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And the last section, page 6, and we'll pick it up next time where we get a little more granular, is just a big open page with lines on it. And what I ask there is, I say, imagine that many, many years from now, you're dead. And friends and family step up to the podium to recall who you were and how you lived your life. If you had to write your eulogy, what would you want people to say about you? And this is an exercise that's very open-ended, and and I know, because I know you do this with your coaching clients. If you can begin with the why now. In fact, in his book, Stephen Covey, he talks about, he takes you through that exercise. He says, imagine that they stand up there and they give your obituary. What are they going to say? And I ask my widows to do that. It's a time where it's fresh in their minds, because they've most likely been preparing for or have just experienced a very moving and very emotional funeral. And this is important because this will give you sort of that why, that energy to grasp and to gather the documents and to understand where you are financially and where you want to be. And I believe at the other end of going through this transition journal, widows can be better for it.
Absolutely. I think that last piece specifically, writing your own obituary or your own eulogy is incredibly powerful. Just for the realization that it ties to the goals that you've already kind of explored in the first few pages of this workbook, and being able to say, I'd really like them to say that I impacted my community. I really want them to be able to say that I knew how to provide for multiple generations by paying for my grandkids' college, or setting the family up for success in the long term for multiple generations by the college or other things, or investing in business opportunities for my grandchildren or my children. If that's important to them, then they revisit those goals and say, okay, how can I make that happen? How can I make that a reality? Or I want them to be able to say, she or he spent an enormous amount of time with the grandkids and investing in them just by her presence and the wisdom that she was able to share. And that time comes from things like having somebody else do your yard work, somebody else do the maintenance on your house, somebody else do the cleaning around your house. Like your example, I believe, was Joanne. And I mean, that's a beautiful thing. And being able to revisit those goals with what you want people to be able to say about you really solidifies it. So I think that's a wonderful start to this workbook and the process that you take these widows through, Ray. I want to ask one more question before we're short on time. How difficult is it? And kind of how do you handle it when you have a widow or someone that's going through this and says, Ray, I just can't do this. I don't know if I can answer this question. This is tough. I mean, maybe it's really raw for them still. Maybe it's really just too fresh in their memory to be able to go through these questions right at this moment, but they really see the importance of this and they want to be able to do it. How do you help them do that?
That's a great question. When you have, as we've talked about in other podcasts, sudden money, oftentimes it's hard to make big decisions and think big thoughts. And sometimes it's actually good not to. Mm-hmm. In our last section of this, of the transition journal, we talk about the things that are urgent and you have to do quickly. And we talk about some of the things that you have to do continuously. And so oftentimes when I talk with folks, that'll be the issue. They'll kind of want to kick the can down the road and procrastinate. We keep track of that. We keep track of some things you have to do before the end of the year, whether it be, an RMD or something. Mm-hmm. And then we also keep track of, hey, you know what, we skipped over some of this stuff. Let's revisit it. And we come back to it gently. And as you know, in the grieving process, it gets easier. But I do believe that these type of questions are extremely important because we want to make sure we're living our best life with a stewardship over the money we've got.
Yeah. Ray, I want to thank you so much for sharing this. And I look forward to the next podcast where we'll continue on this journey through this document and what you do to help your clients. And I just want to say thank you for the wisdom and care that you show your clients and the widows that you have been put in touch with, that have been referred to you, that you've been able to help through this process. And I know it's something that is incredibly needed and vitally important. So thank you again.
You're welcome, man. Thank you.
You bet. And thank you all for listening to the Return on Lifestyle podcast with Rey Descalso. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Ray comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it really easy to share these podcasts with your friends and family. And think about somebody that may be in a situation or close to a situation like this where they may be widowed because of healthcare or things that their spouse is going through. This may be a good tool or resource for them to get a hold of right now. So please do share this podcast with them so they can reach out to Ray. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Bravado Wealth Management, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Return on Lifestyle podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bravado Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider for any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. The following program is sponsored by Bravado Wealth Management, which is solely responsible for its content. Advisory services offered through J.W. Cole Advisors Incorporated. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial Incorporated. Member IFNRA, SIPC. Bravado Wealth Management is an unaffiliated entity from J.W. Cole Advisors and J.W. Cole Financial. The opinions expressed by Rey Descalso should not be construed as specific investment, legal, or tax advice. All economic and performance information is historical and not indicative of future results. Investing may involve the risk of loss of principal. Any tax advice on this show is not intended to be used by any person for the purpose of avoiding U.S. federal or state tax penalties that may be imposed on such person, and each listener should seek advice from their tax advisor or legal counsel on topics that arise from the show. Nothing should be construed as solicitation of an offer to buy securities. The preceding program is sponsored by Bravado Wealth Management, which is solely responsible for its content.